You wake up every day and tell yourself you'll get serious tomorrow. Tomorrow is your favorite lie. Daily effort doesn't care about your mood, your excuses, or your little emotional stories. It shows up like a mirror and exposes exactly who you are. Weak men hate mirrors. Strong men study them. Here's the shock you don't want to hear. Talent is irrelevant. Motivation is a joke. What actually builds power is the boring, repetitive, unglamorous work you keep avoiding. Daily effort doesn't hype you up. It strips you down. It humiliates the version of you that thought comfort was a strategy. If that makes you uncomfortable, good. That's your weakness panicking. You've been taught to believe progress should feel inspiring. That's a lie sold to keep you soft. Real progress feels mechanical, cold, almost inhuman. When you commit to daily effort, something strange happens in your mind. You stop speaking a language of excuses. You stop negotiating with yourself. You develop what I call speaking in tongues, not religious nonsense, but a private internal language of execution. No emotion, no debate, just command and response. This is where identity shifts. Daily effort rewires your inner voice. You stop thinking like a consumer and start thinking like a controller. Your mind stops asking, do I feel like it? And starts stating, this gets done. That internal language is dominance. It's not loud. It's not dramatic. It's calm certainty. The kind that makes other men nervous because they can feel you don't need approval. Most men never experience this because they quit before the transformation kicks in. They touch discipline for a week and expect a reward. That's peasant thinking. Daily effort teaches your mind patience, precision, and authority. It teaches you that power isn't a burst, it's pressure applied consistently until reality bends. You don't chase results, you force them over time. Speaking in tongues is when your actions speak louder than your thoughts. When your routine becomes law. When your habits outrank your feelings. At that point, motivation becomes irrelevant because identity is taken over. You're no longer trying to be disciplined. You are disciplined. That's why weak men call it obsession. They don't understand what control looks like. Daily effort kills delusion because delusion survives only where there is no proof. Most men live inside stories they tell themselves. Stories about potential. Stories about how dangerous they could be if conditions were perfect. Stories about being misunderstood, unlucky, or one opportunity away. Daily effort doesn't argue with these stories. It ignores them and exposes them. The moment you show up every day and put real work on the table, fantasy starts dying. There's no place to hide when the scoreboard updates daily. Hope is cheap. Confidence without evidence is a costume. Daily effort rips that costume off. When you repeat hard actions with no applause, no excitement, and no immediate reward, your mind is forced to confront reality. Either you execute or you don't. Either progress appears or it doesn't. This is why most people avoid daily effort. It's not because it's hard, it's because it's honest. It tells you exactly where you stand, and weak men can't tolerate that truth. The modern world encourages delusion. Social media lets men borrow confidence they haven't earned. Words get mistaken for power. Opinions get confused with competence. Daily effort cuts through that noise like a blade. It doesn't care what you believe about yourself. It only responds to action repeated over time. That's why it's so brutal. You can lie to people. You can even lie to yourself for a while. You cannot lie to a routine that demands output every single day. Something uncomfortable happens when you commit to daily effort. Your excuses start sounding stupid even to you. The stories you once defended start collapsing under their own weight. You realize that intelligence, intention, and ambition mean nothing without consistent execution. That realization hurts. It bruises the ego. It forces a choice. Double down on delusion or submit to discipline. Most men retreat. A few stay and let the pressure reshape them. Daily effort replaces fake confidence with earned certainty. This is the difference between a man who talks loud and a man who moves with quiet precision. Earned certainty doesn't need validation. It doesn't announce itself. It shows up in posture, timing, and decision-making. When you've put in the work daily, you don't need to convince anyone of anything. You know exactly what you're capable of because you've tested yourself repeatedly under resistance. There's also a darker truth most people won't admit. Daily effort reveals limitations, not imagined ones, but real ones. You find out how disciplined you actually are, how focused, how resilient. And instead of pretending those limits don't exist, daily effort gives you the chance to push them back inch by inch. That's where real power starts. Not in believing you're special, but in knowing you're relentless. Men addicted to motivation hate this process because motivation allows escape. You can feel inspired without changing. Daily effort doesn't allow that luxury. It demands payment in time, sweat, and attention. Every day you show up, you either reinforce self-respect or self-disgust. There is no neutral outcome. That constant feedback loop is what kills delusion permanently. You stop seeing yourself as who you want to be and start dealing with who you are. And once delusion dies, something dangerous replaces it. Clarity. You stop overestimating yourself, but you also stop underestimating yourself. You know exactly what you can produce when pressure is applied consistently. That knowledge is calm, grounded, unshakable. It doesn't fluctuate with mood or opinion. It's built on evidence stacked day after day. That's why daily effort is feared. It doesn't hype you up. It turns you into someone who no longer needs hype at all. Discipline creates a new internal language because repetition rewires how your mind communicates with itself. At the beginning, your thoughts are noisy, questions everywhere, doubt arguing with intention, emotion negotiating with logic. That chaos is weakness, pretending to be depth. Daily discipline silences it, not gently, brutally. One repeated action at a time, your mind learns a new rule. Commands matter more than feelings. Most men live inside emotional dialogue. They wake up asking how they feel. They decide based on comfort. Their internal voice sounds unsure, scattered, reactive. Discipline interrupts that pattern. When you do the same hard thing every day, regardless of mood, the mind adapts or collapses. And if you stay long enough, it adapts. The language shifts from should I to do it. No commentary, no drama, just execution. This is where people get it wrong. They think discipline is about forcing yourself. That's beginner thinking. Forcing is temporary. Discipline is conditioning. You are training your mind the same way soldiers are trained to respond under pressure, not with inspiration, but with repetition. Over time, the mind stops resisting because resistance becomes inefficient. Emotion learns it has no authority. Logic steps aside. Command takes over. That internal language is cold and efficient. It doesn't explain itself. It doesn't seek permission. It doesn't ask for motivation. It recognizes the task and moves. That's why disciplined men appear calm in chaos. Their minds aren't debating, they're executing. While others are overwhelmed by options and emotions, the disciplined mind hears one instruction and follows it through. This is also why discipline feels uncomfortable at first. You're killing off an old voice, the voice that wants comfort, the voice that wants justification, the voice that wants to feel good before acting. Discipline replaces that voice with something sharper and quieter. And silence scares people who are used to noise. They confuse emotional intensity with purpose. When that intensity disappears, they panic and call it burnout. It's not burnout. It's withdrawal from emotional dependency. As this internal language develops, something else happens. You stop romanticizing struggle. You stop needing hardship to feel meaningful. Work becomes neutral, almost boring. That's power. When effort no longer needs emotional fuel, it becomes unlimited. You can operate tired, you can operate bored, you can operate under pressure. That's dominance at the psychological level. Men without discipline are constantly persuading themselves. Every action requires a sales pitch. Every decision needs motivation. That's exhausting. Discipline removes persuasion entirely. The mind stops arguing and starts obeying. This is why disciplined men conserve energy. Not physical energy, mental energy. They don't waste it on inner conflict. They've already decided who's in charge. Over time, this internal language spills into every area of life. You speak less, you explain less, you react slower but act faster. People feel the certainty before they understand it. Not because you're loud, but because there's no hesitation in you. No emotional leakage. No need to prove anything. Your actions arrive clean and finished. This is the transformation most men never reach. They flirt with discipline but retreat when it demands silence, obedience, and consistency. They want discipline to feel empowering immediately. It doesn't. It feels restrictive first, like losing freedom. In reality, you're losing chaos, and chaos fights back before it dies. When discipline fully installs this new internal language, your identity locks in. You no longer identify as someone who tries. You identify as someone who executes. That shift is irreversible. Once your mind learns to move on command, going back to emotional decision-making feels unbearable. You don't feel inspired. You feel aligned. And alignment is stronger than motivation ever was. Consistency rewires identity because identity is not what you claim, it's what you repeat. Most men think motivation is the engine of success because motivation feels powerful. It feels loud. It feels like movement. But motivation is unstable. It depends on mood, environment, praise, and energy. That makes it weak. Identity, on the other hand, is quiet and relentless. It doesn't ask how you feel. It decides who you are and enforces it through behavior. Consistency is the mechanism that makes that decision permanent. Every repeated action is a vote, not a thought, not an intention. A physical vote cast through behavior. When you act consistently, your brain is forced to update its self-image. It stops listening to what you say and starts believing what you do. That's why consistency is dangerous. You can lie with words. You can't lie with repetition. If you train daily, your mind accepts that you are disciplined. If you quit daily, it accepts that you are weak. No emotion involved, just pattern recognition. Men who chase motivation live in cycles. High energy, big plans, loud promises. Then silence. Then guilt. Then another motivational surge. That loop keeps them trapped because nothing stabilizes. Consistency breaks the cycle by removing emotional dependence. You stop waiting to feel ready. You act because acting is who you are. That shift is subtle but absolute. The moment your identity changes, effort stops feeling like resistance and starts feeling like alignment. This is where most people misunderstand identity. They think it's confidence. It's not. Confidence can be faked. Identity cannot. Identity is the set of rules your nervous system follows automatically. When consistency is present, those rules get rewritten. You don't need to hype yourself up to work. You feel uncomfortable when you don't. That discomfort is not stress. It's misalignment. The same way a disciplined man feels off when he skips training, an undisciplined man feels off when he's pushed to commit. Consistency also destroys the fantasy version of self-improvement. There's no dramatic moment where you suddenly become someone new. The change is gradual, almost boring, and that's exactly why it works. Identity doesn't shift through emotion. It shifts through evidence accumulated slowly. One day you realize you no longer see discipline as effort. You see it as normal, and anything outside that standard feels beneath you. Once identity takes over, motivation becomes irrelevant. Not useless, just unnecessary. You don't rely on it. If it shows up, fine. If it doesn't, nothing changes. That's real control. The ability to operate regardless of internal state. Most men never reach this because they abandon consistency too early. They want results before identity forms. But identity forms first. Results follow later. That delay filters out the impatient. Consistency also sharpens self-respect. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, you reinforce trust. That trust compounds. You stop doubting your ability to follow through. Decisions become faster because there's no internal debate. You already know you'll execute. That certainty is magnetic. Not because you talk about it, but because it shows in how you move through pressure. There's a harsh truth hidden here. Inconsistency trains the opposite identity. It teaches your mind that your word means nothing, that comfort outranks commitment, that quitting is acceptable. Over time, that becomes automatic. Men like this don't fail because life is hard. They fail because their identity is fragile. They haven't built the internal structure to withstand boredom, resistance, or delay. Consistency is not glamorous, and that's the point. It selects for men who value control over excitement. Over time, you stop identifying with outcomes and start identifying with standards. You don't chase success, you enforce rules. And when identity is built on standards instead of feelings, discipline stops being something you do. It becomes something you are. Boredom is the gateway to dominance, because boredom is where most men run and power lives where others refuse to stay. Everyone talks about pressure, adversity, pain. Very few talk about monotony. That's the real filter. The endless repetition, the quiet days where nothing exciting happens, no praise, no progress you can show off, just the same work again and again. That's where weak men disappear. Not because they can't do the work, but because they can't stand the silence. Most men are addicted to stimulation. They need novelty to feel alive. New plans, new routines, new goals. The moment things become predictable, their attention collapses. They mistake boredom for a signal to quit, when in reality it's a signal that the real work has begun. Boredom is not a lack of progress. It's proof that you've passed the beginner phase, and that terrifies people who live for excitement instead of results. Dominance requires operating without emotional reward. Boredom strips away emotional payoff and leaves only discipline. When there's nothing to entertain you, nothing to motivate you, nothing to distract you, all that's left is your relationship with yourself. Can you execute without feeling special? Can you perform without applause? Most men can't. They need to feel something. They need intensity. They confuse emotional spikes with growth. That confusion keeps them average. Boredom forces mastery because it removes shortcuts. You can't rely on adrenaline. You can't rely on hype. You're left with mechanics, precision, repetition. That's where skill sharpens. That's where control is built. Anyone can push hard when things are exciting. Very few can stay exact when things are dull. That ability separates professionals from amateurs in every domain that matters. There's also an identity test hidden inside boredom. When nothing is happening externally, you find out who you are internally. Men who depend on external stimulation start feeling empty, restless, irritated. They interpret that discomfort as a problem. It's not. It's exposure. Boredom exposes a lack of internal structure, a lack of purpose that isn't dependent on entertainment. Dominant men don't panic here. They settle in. They use boredom as a training ground. Repetition under boredom builds psychological weight. You become harder to move, harder to distract, harder to break. Your nervous system learns stability. You stop reacting to every impulse. You stop chasing stimulation. That calm is dangerous. It gives you patience. It gives you timing. While others rush and burn energy, you wait and apply pressure precisely where it counts. This is why boredom feels heavy at first. It's unfamiliar. Most men have never stayed with it long enough to see what's on the other side. They escape into noise, screens, conversations, constant movement, anything to avoid sitting with the stillness. But stillness is where discipline consolidates, where habits lock in, where identity stops shifting and starts solidify. Boredom also kills entitlement. When you do the work day after day with no excitement, you lose the expectation of reward. That's powerful. You stop feeling owed success. You stop demanding results on your timeline. You work because that's the standard. That mindset creates leverage. You can outlast people who are more talented, more intelligent, even more aggressive because they need stimulation to continue and you don't. Men who master boredom become dangerous in competitive environments. They don't flinch during slow progress. They don't overreact to delays. They don't quit when growth is invisible. They understand that boredom is not stagnation, it's compression. Pressure built in quietly, and when it releases, it looks effortless from the outside. Most people will never understand this. They'll call you obsessive, rigid, extreme. Let them. They confuse comfort with wisdom. You understand something they don't. Boredom is not the enemy of greatness. It's the entrance. And only men willing to walk through it earn the right to control the outcome on the other side. Silent authority is built when effort compounds without announcement. Loud men announce progress because they need witnesses. Quiet men don't speak because the work is still happening. Daily effort done consistently removes the need for explanation. When results are earned slowly and privately, something changes in how you carry yourself. You stop performing confidence. You stop selling potential. You move with the calm of someone who already knows what happens next. Most people associate authority with volume. They think power is asserted by talking more, explaining more, justifying more. That's backward. The more a man explains himself, the less control he has. Silent authority is the opposite. It's when you don't need to convince anyone because your behavior is predictable, precise, and backed by proof. Daily effort creates that predictability. Not for others first, but for yourself. You trust your own process, so you don't seek validation. There's a moment that happens quietly. You stop updating people on what you're doing, not out of secrecy, out of irrelevance. Talking feels like wasted motion. You'd rather invest that energy into execution. That's when people start noticing without you trying. They sense the shift before they can explain it. Your timing improves, your reactions slow down, your decisions land with weight because they're not rushed or emotional. Silent authority also comes from emotional containment. Men without daily effort leak emotion everywhere. Excitement when things go well. Frustration when they don't. Their inner instability shows on the surface. Daily effort flattens those spikes. You stop riding highs and lows because your routine anchors you. That emotional control reads as confidence, even though it's just discipline expressed consistently. When you work daily without noise, you build something rare. Credibility that doesn't depend on attention. You're not trying to be seen, you're building leverage. That's why silence becomes comfortable. You don't feel the urge to announce wins or complain about obstacles. You understand that both are distractions. Progress doesn't need commentary. It needs continuity. This kind of authority makes other men uneasy. Not because you dominate conversations, but because you don't need to. You listen more. You interrupt less. When you speak, it's concise. That restraint signals strength. People associate silence backed by action with competence. They don't consciously think it, they feel it. And feelings drive hierarchy more than logic ever will. Daily effort also sharpens your standards. You become selective with words the same way you're selective with actions. You stop making promises casually. You stop overcommitting. When you say something will happen, it happens. That reliability compounds. Over time, your word gains weight because it's backed by a track record of quiet follow-through. Authority grows not from intensity, but from consistency. Men chasing recognition talk themselves into exhaustion. They confuse being visible with being effective. Silent authority avoids that trap. You let time do the convincing. You let outcomes speak. While others are busy marketing themselves, you're building something that doesn't need marketing. That asymmetry creates an advantage most people never recover from. There's also a strategic side to silence. When people don't know your next move, you control the tempo. You're not reactive. You're not predictable in conversation, only in results. That combination is powerful. It keeps you underestimated by loud amateurs and respected by serious operators. You don't demand space. You occupy it naturally. Daily effort trains you to respect process over applause. That respect becomes visible in how you carry pressure. You don't rush to be heard. You don't need to be liked. You don't argue unnecessarily. You understand that authority isn't claimed, it's observed. And the man who builds it quietly doesn't need to announce it when it arrives. Power comes from obeying your own rules because self-command is the foundation of all dominance. A man who cannot control himself will never control outcomes, people, or pressure. Most men don't fail because the world is unfair. They fail because their internal rules mean nothing. They make promises casually, break them quietly, and then wonder why confidence evaporates. Every time you ignore your own standards, you teach your mind that your word is optional. That lesson compounds fast, and it destroys authority from the inside. Your brain is always learning who's in charge. Either your impulses lead or your rules do. There is no third option. When you obey your own rules consistently, your nervous system adapts. It stops questioning execution. It stops testing boundaries. It accepts that when a decision is made, action follows. That acceptance is power. Not emotional power, structural power, the kind that holds under stress. Most men confuse freedom with flexibility. They think being able to change their mind is strength. It's not. It's instability disguised as openness. Real freedom comes from structure you respect. When you live by rules you enforce daily, decision fatigue disappears. You don't negotiate with yourself. You don't waste energy debating whether to act. You already decided who you are. You simply execute. Obeying your own rules builds self-trust, and self-trust is rare. Men trust others before they trust themselves. They seek accountability externally because internally they're unreliable. When you follow through on what you said you would do, especially when it's uncomfortable, you build internal credibility. Over time, that credibility hardens into certainty. You stop doubting your ability to handle pressure because you've proven it repeatedly in private. Breaking your own rules does the opposite. It trains weakness. It teaches your mind that discomfort is a valid excuse, that short-term relief outranks long-term control. Men who live this way become reactive. They need motivation. They need supervision. They need consequences from the outside because they provide none internally. That's not independence. That's dependency with a different label. When you obey your rules, discipline stops feeling forced. It feels inevitable. The rule exists, so the action happens. Emotion becomes irrelevant. That's when power stabilizes. You can operate tired. You can operate bored. You can operate under pressure without losing direction. Your behavior becomes predictable to yourself, and that predictability is calming. Calm is dangerous because it allows precision. There's a psychological shift that happens here. You stop seeking permission from others and from yourself. You don't need to feel ready. You don't need to feel confident. You act because the rule demands it. Over time, that trains your mind to associate action with identity. You don't see yourself as someone trying to be disciplined. You see yourself as someone who does what he says. That identity is heavy. It carries weight into every environment you enter. Men who obey their own rules speak differently. They promise less. They commit selectively. But when they commit, it's final. That reliability creates leverage. People trust them without explanation. Opportunities open not because they ask, but because they're known to follow through. Authority starts internally and radiates outward naturally. There's also a brutal clarity that comes with this path. You can no longer blame circumstances. If you fail, you know exactly why. You broke a rule. That honesty is uncomfortable, but it's empowering. You're no longer confused about your own performance. You know the standard. You know when you violated it. That clarity eliminates excuses and replaces them with control. Most men will never experience this level of power because it requires consistency without reward. It requires respecting your word when no one is watching. It requires treating your own rules as law. But once your mind learns that your commands are non-negotiable, everything changes. You stop chasing confidence. You stop searching for motivation. You move through life with the quiet certainty of someone who knows one thing for sure. When you decide, it gets done. Here's the final truth. Daily effort doesn't make you happy. It makes you dangerous. It gives you self-respect, leverage, and an unshakable sense of authority over your own life. If you can't commit to that, stay average and stop pretending you want power. But if you can, understand this clearly. Once your mind learns this language, there is no going back. You either rule your routine or exposes you as weak. Choose.